day, and welcome to the Community Nonprofit Network Podcast, aka the CNN Podcast. My name is Ericka Scott, and with me is my lovely co-host, Sheila Hardy. So Sheila, who do we have today?
We have Kaitlyn Ball. She's the Civic Engagement Program Coordinator with the Cobb Collaborative. Kaitlyn, how are you?
I'm doing wonderful. How are you guys doing today?
We're doing great. So tell us about what you do.
Yes, so I am the Civic Engagement Program Coordinator with Cobb Collaborative, and we are a 501c3 nonprofit here in Cobb County. We're actually a part of the Georgia Family Connection Partnership, which is a statewide organization, and so every county kind of has a Cobb Collaborative per se. And that allows us to really focus on the needs of that specific community. So Cobb County is going to have very different needs from a rural county in Georgia, from a coastal county in Georgia. So it allows us to focus in on what our specific community needs in terms of resources. So in Cobb, we focus on three main initiatives, and that's going to be mental health, literacy, and civic engagement. And civic engagement is where I come in. Really supported by the Southern Poverty Law Center's Vote Your Voice initiative. So we received grant money from SPLC specifically for Vote Your Voice to focus on in our civic engagement initiative. And the whole purpose of Vote Your Voice is to provide voter education, registration, and mobilization information to underserved communities in Cobb County. Really, they serve all over the southern states, but we are focusing here in Cobb with those grassroots efforts, those on-the-ground movements, to provide voter education and information to those communities that don't typically get the resources and access that they need to be able to make educated decisions for themselves. Our focus areas are on youth, so really targeting young people who are just reaching that age of registration that may not be engaged or understand the process. We also focus on communities of color, low-income communities, senior citizens, and formerly and currently incarcerated individuals. There's also a lot of overlap in these communities too. So really providing that education piece is so important in engaging those communities from all different aspects. And in terms of what we provide, so it is all nonpartisan. So we make sure that we do not push any particular party or candidate, but we provide voter education in terms of why is it important to vote, right? So regardless of what you believe and what your values are, we want to empower you and put resources in your hands to make educated decisions for yourself, regardless of what party you affiliate with or what issues you may really care about. And so we just provide information on why is it so important to vote and why your vote matters. And then the registration piece is just making sure people are registered, not only getting those who are not registered to register, but also making sure that people check their registration status. A lot of people don't really realize that they can become inactive until it's too late, right? Until they go vote and then they're like, oh, wait, I can't vote because of these roadblocks that are put in place. Or, maybe I moved and I didn't update my registration status with my current address. Maybe I changed my name and got married, but didn't update that when I got married and changed my name. Or, if you've been inactive for a while, if you don't participate actively in elections, you can be put on that inactive status. And so there's multiple layers to it of why you need to also verify your registration status. So we do a lot of that piece as well, and just making sure people are checking and updating that status. And then in terms of voter mobilization, we provide information on how to vote. So there's different ways that you can vote, but especially with different barriers with voting laws and changes to voting laws, it makes it very confusing. And so we try to clear up some of that confusion surrounding absentee ballots and the request periods and the ID requirements that you need. So just that information of what is required for you to vote and how you can go vote, and make sure you don't miss any deadlines or any important information.
Awesome. Talk to us about how your program works, starting off by going in the jails themselves? Because I think that's a really interesting piece.
Yes. So voting for incarcerated or formerly incarcerated individuals is a really big piece. So there is a lot of confusion and misinformation surrounding voting rights for those that are incarcerated.
Right.
So in Georgia, the only time where your voting rights are taken away is if you are convicted of a felony. If you're convicted of a misdemeanor, you can still vote. You still have the option and the right to vote. Again, it's just that not knowing your rights and not knowing what you can do and how to actively do that. So we are working with the Cobb NAACP to go into Cobb County jails and just get people registered, right? So we talk to the detainees who maybe haven't been convicted yet or are kind of awaiting trial, and we make sure that they're registered and that they know their rights. So we go into them pretty frequently, and we're in the process of setting that up to go on a regular basis to make sure that those who want to register are able to register. And then if they want, if election time comes and we can start requesting absentee ballots, if they know that they're going to be in there for a period of time, they can get an absentee ballot sent to the jail. That way they can vote in jail. So there are options for that, but we do provide those registration forms as well and those absentee applications. Also, for those that are formerly convicted of a felony, once you complete your whole sentence, probation, parole, everything, your rights are automatically restored, but you have to re-register. But again, there's so much misinformation surrounding that, and people don't know their rights when it comes to voting. And also, voting is the last thing on their minds, right? If you're trying to reintegrate back into society after you've been in prison for a long time, you're worried about where your next meal is coming from, where you're going to be sleeping, if you need mental health services or addiction services or childcare. There's all of these things that are so much more important. When you look at the hierarchy of needs, you have to make sure that your safety and security and all that is met first before you can start thinking about those bigger things like being civically engaged. But the pieces of reintegration are supported by our elected officials and by the people in place that make those policies. And so if we empower those that are in the system and dealing with and coming into contact with those services that they need, we need to make sure that they're empowered to make their voice heard and get support and get that representation in office so they can provide those support services for when they are reintegrating, and they have the access they need to reduce recidivism, right? We don't want people to go back into jail once they've already gone through the process and have, returned back into society. We don't want them to go back into jail. And so those support services are so crucial in that reducing recidivism that's why it's important. And so we have created a resource guide that kind of connects those pieces. So it gives information about the services that they may need. It gives information about recidivism and how to kind of curb that. It also provides information on how to register to vote. So once you've completed everything and you're off paper, it kind of shows you how to get that information, talking to your probation and parole officers, but then how to get IDs. If you need an ID to get registered to vote again and you don't have one, we have organizations that we partner with that can help in that sense. Vote Riders is an incredible organization that can get you the IDs that you need, whether that be, if you need a birth certificate, they will help pay for that and get that access or get those resources that you need. And they'll even pay for transportation if you need to go to the DMV to get an ID or something. So there's different organizations that we have in that program or that guide as well that can help with those, making sure that they know what they need to be registered to vote and how to register to vote, and then just encouraging them to use their voice and make sure that it's heard. And we have been delivering those returning citizen voter guides to different organizations that work with the returning citizen community. The Cobb County Second Chance Desk through the DA's office, they have some there. We have other nonprofits that work with the returning citizen community. We have digital and print resources as well. So we have all of it on our website that people can share. We want to share this and spread this information. So it is available on our website if anybody wants to take that and share that with their community as well.
Awesome. Awesome. And just to be clear real quick, when you're going in to speak with inmates, even it's as long as they're up on charges but not convicted of a felony, they can still vote.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
It's only when you have been convicted is when of a felony is when that right is taken away. But if you're awaiting trial and everything, you still have that right. So we do make sure that everyone that's eligible is registered if they choose to be, and then providing them with that information of how to make their educated vote as well. Awesome.
That's wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let me ask you about the young people. Let's go back to them. First of all, I'm going to ask you, when was the first time, or do you remember the first time you voted, and how did you feel when you started voting for the first time?
Oh, yeah. So my first time voting was the 2016 presidential election. And I remember feeling excited, being like, oh my gosh, I get to vote now. And I could vote before that. I think the first time I could vote was the 2012 election, but I had just turned 18, was kind of confused, didn't really know. And so I was like, well, I'll just wait. And then the first time I actually voted was that 2016 presidential election. And I went in there like, yes, I am ready to go. I know who I want to vote for, and was so excited to get my little sticker. And then I get there and realized that I had no idea what I was doing. I got there, was waiting in line, and then you got the sample ballot that you could see. And I was like, wait a minute, what are all of these other seats on here? What are these like referendums and stuff? I'm like so confused, waiting in line, trying to figure out, wait, who are these people? Who am I going to vote for? What is this little referendum at the bottom that I'm trying to interpret as I'm like waiting in line? And so for me, that first time voting was a little bit eye-opening of the whole process. And it makes sense that people are confused and don't know necessarily how to make that educated decision for themselves or understanding what all is on your ballot. And that's a big piece of Vote Your Voice, is just making sure that people know what they're doing when they go to vote, right? So we try to make sure that people view their sample ballot before they go into the election, so they're not like me waiting in line trying to Google real quick who these certain people are and what they do, how they're going to serve me. And so we have a couple of great resources that we provide. We have, when we do like tabling events or registration drives, we also give out information of how to make that educated and informed vote. And so first, we always encourage people to go to the Secretary of State website and view their sample ballot, because that is going to give you details on your specific precincts and your specific districts and who you're going to be voting for, because, right, your ballot may be different from your neighbor's ballot that lives like 3 streets down or something. If you live in different districts in a different neighborhood or something, your ballot may be different. And so it's important to look at that information beforehand so you can see, okay, what all is going to be on my ballot, who is going to be on there, and then taking that a step further and linking them to nonpartisan websites that provide information about candidates. So this is what this person does for me in their seat and for my community, and this is their beliefs and their values. So there's 2 really great websites that we try to recommend people go to. Vote411.org is the first one. That one is run by the League of Women Voters. That one is a nonpartisan website where people can put in their address, it pulls up their ballot, and then it also gives them candidate information. Vote 411 will send candidates a little questionnaire, and they will fill it out and return it back to them, or they won't fill it out and they put that on their website as well. And then another great website is going to be through the Georgia Muslim Voter Project. It's a branch, is the name of the website, but it's gamvp.branch.org. vote. And that website is, again, the same kind of thing where you put in your address, it pulls up everything that's going to be on your ballot, and then it tells you a little bit about each candidate. They also have a questionnaire they send out, but they take it a step further and also give you information about that seat. So that's something that's confusing that maybe people didn't pay much attention to in government class and don't really know. What does the Attorney General do? What does the Secretary of State do? But those are important things to know when we go vote, because we need to know how they're going to impact us. And so that website will tell you a little bit about what each seat does, how it impacts you in your community, and then how those candidates fit in that, what their values are and beliefs are in terms of how they're going to impact you. So those are two websites that we try to encourage people to go to find information. That way it can help them make their decision before going into the polls. Lots of different, counties will do candidate forums a lot. So check your county website, different local newspapers or local websites, or, like little magazines, things like that in your local community will also have a lot of information about candidates. So we encourage people to look at all different types of information because there is a lot of misinformation out there as well. But finding those trusted sources where it is nonpartisan and it is trying to just kind of give you the facts instead of saying like, this person is great and this person sucks, you should vote for this person, right? So this is more like, let me tell you how it is, let me give you the facts, and then you can make your vote from there.
What is one of the biggest misinformation that's out there that you want to tell the audience about?
In terms of biggest misinformation, I think there's a lot of information kind of out there and misinformation about election security. So that's one thing. We just want to make sure that people are getting their sources from trusted, or getting their information from trusted sources, because there is a lot of information that's saying like there's been a bunch of ballots being found randomly and counted, or like people are voting multiple times. But our elections are very secure, and we do so many checks to make sure that they are secure. And so we just want to make sure that people are encouraged to vote, and that it does matter and it does make a difference, that your vote does count. And so I think that's a piece that kind of feeds into that voter apathy of people being like, well, my vote doesn't really count and my voice isn't being heard, so why am I going to vote? But it does. Our elections are very safe and secure, and your vote does count. So we want people to make sure that they're encouraged to vote. And also just make sure, if you're looking through Facebook or something and you see an article that may be like slandering or very kind of polarizing, sometimes those articles may be fake. They may not have trusted sources and information. So just always kind of checking out maybe the websites of where you're getting information from. I think that's really important in making sure that information you're consuming is accurate information and isn't just something that's kind of built to spread misinformation, which is out there. And I mean, especially with technology, it gets really hard to see which one is real and which one is not, and what's fake and what's not. But just making sure that, you can kind of tell if you go to the website, looking at kind of the content that they have on their website. It's typically like government or .org. Those websites are typically pretty good and trusted. But yeah, just checking your sources. I think that's a big thing too.
You deal with two very different demographics in regards to returning citizens, and even those who haven't returned yet, as in inmates, detainees, and younger people. So what's the marketing channel that works best in those different areas?
Yeah, so that is something that we definitely have to consider, right? Something that works for one demographic or population is not going to work and be as effective to another population, right? You can't market to senior citizens and young people the same way because they're not going to consume it the same way. And so young people, I get so excited when we work with young people because they have so much energy and so much passion still inside of them. And we just have to kind of tap into that passion for them. But a lot of how we engage the youth is through social media, but also through peer conversation and peer engagement, right? You tend to listen to people who are in your circle and that are trusted, and
Yes.
that you relate to and you resonate with. And so we do have interns, and we are actually looking for interns for the fall semester. In any high school in Cobb County, we have a focus on our South Cobb area. So like South Cobb, Pebblebrook, Campbell, McEachern, Marietta High School. Don't know if I didn't miss any, but we would definitely take students from any high school in Cobb County. We're also looking at the colleges in our areas too, like Kennesaw State, Chattahoochee Tech. So we want to get interns involved in those, the youth involved themselves, because we feel like they can have those conversations that really resonate with their peers, right? Finding things that they care about, but doing it through social media. We are also looking for specifically a social media intern that can tap into the TikTok and Instagram channels that we have, to really, and creating conversation, right? Like, it's not just about getting people registered, because a lot of people are already registered, or they know that like they should register when they turn 18 or when they update their license or something, to get registered. But it's actually engaging them is the important piece that is crucial in this, because I feel like to young people, they have seen a lot of broken systems and they feel the effects of broken systems.
Yes.
And I think that kind of sparks voter apathy in them of like, this system doesn't even work. Why am I going to engage in this? But like, voting is kind of the first piece in creating some of that change, because if we have elected officials that will listen to us and that will try to repair some of the brokenness in the systems that we do have, we can push further and make more change. And so engaging the youth through social media and the different ways that they can create content that really speaks to why it's important, and kind of putting it into perspective of, how big of an impact your vote has, right? Like we look at the 2020 election and President Biden won Georgia by like 12,000 votes or something like that, a very, very small margin actually.
Right.
And in Cobb County alone, there were over 160,000 registered voters who did not vote. And so that,
wow.
I mean, it's crazy to think that like we have so many people that are registered, but it's just that engagement portion, right? Over 160,000 people were just not engaged in that election. And so it's putting it into those perspectives too of like, your vote makes such a big difference, right? One county could have shifted an entire election, right. The entire outcome of the state of Georgia, right? And so trying to let them know that your voice does have a big impact, especially in local elections, because, even when I was young and first time voting, I only thought about the presidential elections. I wasn't really even thinking about the municipal elections or those runoff elections or anything that were happening. But, those local elections, municipal elections, those midterm elections, those are so much more impactful on your day to day, because they impact your direct community. They're representing your direct community.
Right.
And those are to me, more important elections than maybe the presidential election. But also, when you vote in those smaller elections or those local elections where there is a smaller pool of people voting, your vote holds even more weight because you don't have that turnout. And a lot of people really only turn out for those presidential elections. So you have even lower turnout rates for local municipal elections, which again means your voice has an even bigger impact in those elections. And so it's putting it into those perspectives too, of like your voice can really, really shape your community. But you have to use it, you have to make sure that you are creating that representation in office through your vote, and engaging with your elected officials after you vote, to make sure that they are representing your community in a way that is true to you and not just something of what they may want to push or what their agendas are. And this summer, we've actually done a few summer camps too with middle and high school groups. So some of those are not quite of voting age, but I think planting that seed in them from a young age too is so important, because you can be civically engaged at any age. We actually worked with Georgia Muslim Voter Project recently to partner with us in some workshops where we did some legislative workshops where, first, we talked about the importance of registering and how to register and, why your vote is important. But then also taking that a step further of like, here's how you can create a legislative piece or write to your legislator to make sure that they're staying accountable, or if you see something that you want changed, how you can make a difference. And you can do that as a middle schooler or an elementary schooler. Like, you don't have to just be 18 to vote and to be engaged. You can be engaged at any age. And so we do these workshops to show them the importance of voting, and also how it impacts them, but what they can do at their age. And then when the time comes, they'll be ready, prepared, well equipped to go vote. We also do this activity with them where we go through the voting rights history timeline. So we have this big long timeline spread across the wall, and it goes from 1776 when the Declaration was signed and our fight for voting rights kind of started, and only white male Protestant landowners could vote, and up to today. So that timeline goes all the way to today. And we look at those big moments in history, and when women got the right to vote, when African Americans got the right to vote, when those with disabilities had more access to vote, right? So all of these big pieces in the timeline of voting rights history. And we realized that major changes and major shifts happened only in the last 100 years or so, right? When we've been fighting this fight for hundreds of years. And so I think putting that into perspective for them too helps them understand why people have been fighting and are still fighting for access to voting rights, right? Like, we may have gotten over some of those overt barriers, but now there's a lot of covert barriers, those kind of hidden barriers that make it harder for people to vote, and especially those underserved communities, which is what we're trying to target through Vote Your Voice, and overcoming those barriers, making sure people know where to vote, know how to vote, know how to get the IDs that they need to vote, know the requirements around absentee applications, the changes to Dropbox locations. We want to equip people with the knowledge of how to vote, and do it in a way where they feel empowered.
Those websites that you mentioned, do they talk about where you can drop your ballot off, and do they explain the absentee voter and all of those that you just mentioned? So
I believe that some of them do. I know that they provide polling locations, so you can check your polling location. Where we always direct people is the county website. So your county website is going to tell you where, say advanced voting locations, they will have a whole list of advanced voting locations. And when you vote early, you can vote at any advanced voting location in your county. But a lot of those advanced voting locations will have drop boxes located inside of them. And so they will specify on that sheet, this is a Dropbox location, this is a Dropbox location, or this is not. And it is important to note that Dropbox locations are not 24-hour access anymore, so you can't just go whenever. So you get off at 10 p.m. and you want to drop your ballot off. They're actually located inside of those locations now, which means they're only open during hours of operation, or only accessible during hours of operation. So that makes it even more difficult, for somebody who, say you have a job where you work during those hours and you can't take the time off to go drop off your ballot, you can send it in by mail, but you have to make sure that you're sending it with plenty of time for it to go through the mail to get to the elections office by 7 p.m. on election day. You don't want to put your ballot in the mail the day before the election because it's not going to have time to go through the mail system and get to that elections office by the time it needs to for your vote to be counted. So again, those are additional barriers of limiting that access to drop box locations. But those are things that we make sure that people know. And again, those county websites are going to have all of that information for your specific county drop box locations, advanced voting locations, even precinct changes, because, here in the runoff election in June, there were precinct changes from May. So, if you voted in May and then we're going to vote again in the runoff in June, that location that you may have voted at in May may not be the one that you're voting at in June, because and so making sure that you're checking your precinct location before too is really important. And sometimes they change them periodically and you don't want to show up to the wrong one. And it is important to know that on election day, you have to go to your specific precinct location. So make sure to always check your polling location before heading to the polls. That way you don't run into any issues or have to be turned away, or, your vote will still count.
It almost seems like a shell game. Listening to you, it's like, well, is it here? Is it there? Is it, it's behind me now? That's crazy.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is that it's not a hard process, but it seems like it is. It makes it harder, right? There's all of these little things, all of these little roadblocks and hurdles that people have to jump through to be able to just vote, right? And so,
exactly.
We try to eliminate as many of those barriers or try to help push people over those hurdles as best as we can through our different efforts.
Do you take a survey of people, or do you have a team who takes a survey of why people did you vote? Oh no, why didn't you vote? What's the number one reason that you get?
So we specifically have not done any type of surveys or kind of gathering that type of data, but I know that there are plenty of organizations that have. Through Vote Your Voice, we actually have access to Blue Labs, which is a source of data. They run different research campaigns. They track a bunch of different data. That's how we know where our low turnout areas are, and we can kind of target those. They have demographic breakdowns and stuff. But I think, one of the biggest reasons of why people don't vote is kind of that voter apathy, where they're like, why does it matter? Like, I go vote and then it doesn't turn out the way I want it to, or I vote for somebody that isn't doing what they said that they were going to do. And so it's just, people are tired of that, and they're just discouraged to go out to vote. Also, I think lack of information about voting, and the awareness in some communities is really lacking. There's certain areas that get a lot more attention than others. And so, we look at those low turnout areas and they're just not getting the same resources, the same attention, and the same knowledge with, where to vote, the changes to voting laws, when the deadlines are, right? If you want to register, you have to make sure you do it by the deadline, which is typically around 30 days or so before an election. And so if you miss that window, you can't vote in that election. You've got to wait. And so just knowing those pieces is another barrier as to why people don't vote. And so again, that's why we try to really get out into the community to provide information. We're also trying to work with local churches and different businesses and stuff in the areas, because we want to put information in the hands of trusted leaders so people are more encouraged to vote. Because me, a young, white, middle-class female, don't always represent the communities that we're trying to reach. And, people may look at me and be like, why should I trust you to go vote? Why should I listen to you? to tell me to go vote. And so when we can equip the trusted leaders in the community with the resources and information that they need, they can encourage their congregation or their communities to be involved. We're doing a lot with Cobb and AACP this year in terms of voting stuff, and not only the jail voting, but also doing some souls to the polls, working with churches in the community to make sure that people are registered, but then that they're actively going together, right? So they'll have a church service and then we'll go vote, especially during like early voting periods and stuff. So yeah. So those are really important pieces too, in just making sure that people are aware, but then people that have a big voice in the community are also spreading that awareness and information. Cause that's a lot of it too, is a lot of civic engagement and voting information is just by talking about it to your family and friends, me telling my brother, hey, you need to go vote. And talking to my friends about the whole system and the different rules and stuff, and engaging your peers, and again with the youth, engaging their classmates and their other students to say, hey, this is why it's important, we should go vote. And like having those personal one-on-one conversations to me is the most impactful. It's not just being at a table like, hey, are you registered, but like having those conversations of what's important to you, what matters to you,
right,
here's how voting impacts that, and here's why you should go vote. So just again, with trusted leaders being able to be a voice for their community as well, we want to equip them with that information and those resources too.
Yeah, I think you're right on with that. People are tired of the people that they're voting. They're seeing these commercials, and just like I referred to the shell game with the polling stations, it's almost like a bait and switch. You get these great promises. Oh, great. Seniors are going to be better taken care of, and economically disadvantaged communities are going to be uplifted and resources made available. And then they get in there and it's like, well, we're working on it. Yeah, that's coming. That's on the list. That's on the agenda. But then right at the end of that first term, it becomes, well, yes. Okay. Now, things are, we're rolling with it. And then they get back in that second term, and then you're just really in for a whirlwind of disappointments, because I got the second term. I can't do a third. So I'm basically going to do what I want to do. I think that is the disappointment. Let me ask you this, and then I'll let Sheila take it from here. But, two-part question. For one, somebody because you're targeting 18-year-olds, who may not have a car. You had mentioned, I believe earlier, that there are nonprofits or organizations who will help with transportation. And I know you said to get registered to vote, but is that also to go vote?
There are different organizations that do help people go to vote.
Okay.
There are going to be some other, I don't know specifically right now, Cobb County ones that are doing it, but there are different organizations that do provide transportation to get people to the polls during those election periods. We'll know once it gets closer to early voting and election day, those organizations will start to make that voice in the community and make that known of which ones are going to be doing it. Also check rideshare services. So a lot of times during elections, like Uber and Lyft, they'll provide discounts or free rides to polling locations. So it's always good to check different ride services. I think during the 2020 elections, even like the Arthur Blank Foundation was providing free rides to people. So there's definitely a lot of community organizers who get people to and from the polls. But if you're worried about transportation, absentee applications or absentee ballots is a really good thing to utilize, because if you do have limited transportation, if you're going to be traveling, if you're in college, if you are out of state or just 5 hours away, like in Savannah or something, and you can't come back to your home to vote during those periods, absentee applications are incredible because they eliminate those barriers of transportation and travel. So just, again, keep in mind those dates and deadlines and request periods, because those have changed a little bit too. During an election, currently, you can request an absentee application. I believe it's 78 to 11 days before an election. So you've got a good amount of time. You've got a few months. I think it starts towards the end of August when you can start requesting your absentee ballots. And then you'll put a mailing address of where you want that to go. So if you are a college student or somebody that's traveling out of town or something, you can have it sent to that address that you'll be at, but then you'll still be voting for your home precincts and districts and whatnot. And then again, making sure you just get that ballot back in the mail with plenty of time to get to the elections office before election day. So that's definitely an option for those young people or even senior citizens or disabled, if you have just transportation or don't want to deal with polling lines. Some people don't want to wait hours in a polling line. So absentee application is also a good option for that.
Well, that was a two-part. You answered one because one was, what is the time frame to get an absentee? But now I guess I don't know if maybe the rules have changed a few years with Barack's second term, election.
Mm-hmm.
I at the time I was an over-the-road truck driver and found out at the last minute that I wasn't going to be here, on election
Mm-hmm.
day. But I was maybe mistakenly or on purpose told the wrong thing, that not being here for work was not a reason to be able to request an absentee ballot. I don't know if that was right, but right now, as we speak, what are the reasons? Can you just, because it sounds like you're saying for any reason, if you just don't have a ride or don't want to go, you can request an absentee ballot. Is that what you're saying?
Correct. So yeah, Georgia is
Wow.
actually a no excuse absentee state. So in the state of Georgia, you do not need a reason to vote absentee. But again, that misinformation that's out there, some people don't know changes to that, or some people have been fed misinformation for a long time that they don't know what is actually allowed and what's not. But yes, in the state of Georgia, anybody that wants to vote with an absentee ballot can. And so we encourage anybody that does want to do it. And again, our elections are safe and you can track your ballot. So on the Secretary of State website, Georgia My Voter page is going to be your best friend because one, that's where you can register and verify your registration status. You can update it if you need to. You can check your polling locations. You can view a sample ballot on that website. But then if you vote absentee, you can also track your absentee ballot. So it'll let you know if they've received it or not, if it's still in transit. And then if they ever have any issues with your ballot, say you didn't fill it out correctly or you're missing a signature somewhere, they'll send it back to you so you can correct it. But again, it's important to make sure you give yourself plenty of time in case there's any issues, right? You don't want to mail it the week before and then you miss a signature or a check mark somewhere and then they have to mail it back to you and then for you to correct it. So if you're going to be voting absentee, make sure to give yourself plenty of time to get it turned in by the time the election happens. That way, if there are any issues that arise, you can correct them before you miss that deadline.
I'll say you're right. Get it in, but I'll tell you what, and it's probably both sides, so I won't say which way I vote, but I know I had mine in about a month in advance, but about 3 days ahead of time, I start getting calls because my name is on a list of a signature needed. So I'm having to pull out, download this app and, go here and sign this. And and I'm like, okay, do you understand? I'm legally blind is why I wrote absentee, but we got it done. The call, you get on that list and the calls just come 4, 5, 6 times a day. And I'm like, okay, now you're making me not want to vote. I'm not doing this again. So, but that tracking, that's really good. That's awesome. I'm sorry, Sheila. Yeah, I'm quiet.
Oh no, you're good. You're good. But yeah, I agree with you. You got the calls, I got the texts.
Yeah,
you were just texting me, and I was like, okay.
Yeah, I feel like
I've already voted.
Yes, like honestly, I feel like the bombardment of those campaigns, I think, is something that turns people off too, because they're like, oh my gosh, stop blowing me up, stop texting me and calling me all the time to go vote. Like it's discouraging me at this point. But you know, it shows that people do care about this mission, and that people do want to make sure that everybody's voice is heard and that everybody has their right to vote. And so as annoying as some of those texts and calls can be, I think it does show that there is hope and that there is still such a fight, and that there are great organizations out there making sure that people's voices are being heard.
Right. Well, I was impressed because I got more people from out of town. I mean, California, Washington. I'm like, how's the weather? Thank you. We're squared away now. So, but they're already starting with the calls. They're already starting about once every 2 weeks. I'm getting a call, and it's getting closer and closer as we get closer and closer. So, yeah.
Yeah, it would really trip me out, especially when we knew that, we're going to be voting, and then it used to be where it was on the TV all the time, commercials, and it's like, oh God. But it was interesting. Another question for you is, we're having a shortage of housing, and we know that a lot of people are losing their homes, and it's right now they have nowhere to go. They're in shelters. What would you recommend for people that are in shelters right now concerning about voting?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, the housing crisis is insane right now. There's no affordable housing, and people are getting pushed out of their homes left and right. And it doesn't seem like there's a lot of support around that. But again, those people, their voices are incredibly important, because we need people in office who are going to be able to support those systems when we can't afford where we live, when we can't afford groceries, when we can't afford gas, when all of these things that are impacting us and that we don't have a lot of control over, we need somebody that's going to be able to support us. And so for those that are facing homelessness or facing evictions, I spoke with somebody in the Cobb elections office, and it's not like they have a way to track, if you're moving place to place and stuff, but it is important that you update your address and your registration status when you move or when you go somewhere else. So if you are displaced from your home and you are in a shelter, you can update that address to that shelter. So as long as that address can receive mail, you can update your address as many times as you need to for the elections office. So if you're going to be in a shelter for a period of time, update it to the shelter's address. If you're going to go to a friend's house and stay with them for a while, update it to their address. You can definitely update it as many times as you need to, but anywhere that can receive mail is going to be an address that you can put on there. So, if there's maybe well, I don't want to misspeak on that. So, but yeah, definitely, if you are, receiving assistance from a shelter, if you're staying somewhere that you have a place that can receive mail, just go ahead and update that status. Because again, you don't want to necessarily be flagged either, because they do voter purge rolls. They do try to check and try to knock people off the voter rolls with purges and things like that. So that's when they can check too if like your mailing address matches the address that you have on your voter registration and stuff. And so sometimes that's when it will flag you as inactive. But if you're continuing to update your address as you go from place to place or wherever it may be that you are, you should be okay. You just keep that updated, and then you can use that voice that you have to vote, and hopefully vote for somebody that can support you and can provide representation for those that really need assistance in that aspect.
I am excited for the day, because I know it's coming. Where like voting will be a lot like the census. When I worked with the census, I was a supervisor, and my enumerators had to go around to different places, and everything that was put in there it was uploaded immediately. So there was no, okay, well, they took their iPhone over here and deleted it. You couldn't, it was like immediate information was uploaded. So I don't understand what the problem is, why we're not doing that yet, so that, we can go around in the neighborhoods and the hospitals and the shelters and the suburban lodges and get this done. It's ridiculous that we're even having to fight about, you can't feed somebody, you can't give somebody water on a line, because if we could go to the people, there wouldn't be a line. That is my opinion, but that, I think modern technology is too far advanced for us to fight over what you can do for somebody in line when there really should be no line. There shouldn't be a line at the church. We're in the South. There is a church of every denomination within a mile. Why are there problems with voting places? Oh gosh.
Well, I think we know that answer.
I know. That's my rant. I digress. I'm sorry.
And that's why we should vote.
Yes.
That's a big thing. That's why we should vote. Awesome. Well, we're going to our next segment. What would you do?
Yay!
So here is your question. All right. Are you ready, Kaitlyn?
I'm ready. Lay it on me.
Okay. All right. Okay. If you could change one thing in the world, what would it be?
If I could change one thing, well, there's a lot of things I would change, but I think, to me, I wish there was more kindness in the world. I wish that there was just more compassion for people. I think too, especially, here in America, we're very focused on ourselves, and, how do we get to be at the top, and how do we get to be the best? And a lot of times we don't look at our whole communities, and each other in a way, that is compassionate and empathetic for one another. And I think if we had more kindness and more empathy and could see through a lens that is not our own, I think we would have a lot more good things in the world. We'd have maybe voting systems that would be accessible to everybody, and we could go and have everyone vote by going to them. But I think that there's just a lot of corruption in the world, and a lot of greed and power hunger, and so I think if we had a little bit more empathy and compassion for one another, I think we could make big things and big changes happen for our whole selves.
Awesome.
Yeah, awesome. That's great. Okay, and what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail?
If I knew I couldn't fail, I personally would start a band or something, or like open up a coffee shop or something, right? Like something like that. I've always actually had this dream. Well, not always. Recently, I've had this dream. I started taking a pottery class, like a ceramics wheel throwing class, and was thinking, it would be so cool to open up a studio that provided therapy to individuals that use different creative methods, using like arts and using music and using pottery and painting and different forms of art to provide therapy. So that's a dream that I have. Maybe years down the road, like maybe one day that could happen, where I could open up a studio or a center that provides that. But
that is amazing.
Yeah,
that's I don't see that failing, honestly. I mean that is amazing, and as long as anything can fail, as long as you if you don't do it the right way. But yeah, definitely don't put that too far back on the back burner.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, it's there, but just gotta learn a little bit more before I can do that. But I'm working on it one day.
Awesome.
Maybe I'll be back in this podcast talking about that. So.
There you go. As a nonprofit. Hey.
Exactly. Yeah. Put it out there.
Well, let me ask you this. Where can our listeners find you and your nonprofit online? Where can they find you? I know you said it before, but we just want to make sure that they have that information.
Mm-hmm. So check out our website. It's cobbcollaborative.org, COBBCOLLABORATIVE.org. Don't know if you need that spelled out, but I did it for you. So cobbcollaborative.org is going to be just kind of an overarching view of everything that we do in our community. Like I mentioned before, we don't only do voting and civic engagement stuff. We have a ton of resources for mental health and literacy. Part of our organization, we are a membership-based organization. We are a convener. So we don't provide a ton of direct services, like we don't provide therapy or, a food bank, but we do provide resources and connect people to other nonprofits and other organizations, government agencies, higher education, even our lower education, making sure that all of our entities in our community are connected. And so we provide resources. We have a wonderful mental health toolkit that has a lot of information about adverse childhood experiences, suicide awareness and prevention, then providing lists of resources and hotlines for people that need access to different things. We provide trainings and stuff. So check out our calendar of events. We have a ton going on all the time. And if you want to be a member, you can be a member too. Sign up for our newsletters. Our newsletters are packed with wonderful information, not only of what we're doing, but everything else in our community and spreading that awareness and sharing information from our community members. So cobbcollaborative.org. And feel free to shoot us an email if you have questions, if you want us to come present to your group, if you want us to work with your church or something and provide resources and information. If you go to the voting page, I think it's under our initiatives and civic engagement. If you go to that voting page, we do have some of our digital resources on there as well. And again, anything that we don't have on there or anything that you want us to provide, we can likely make that happen. So feel free to reach out. My personal email is going to be kball, KBALL, @cobbcollaborative.org.
Awesome. And shout out to Irene Barton, who actually introduced Sheila and myself.
Yes.
She's a master networker. We were just talking about her yesterday. She is just so on it. It's awesome. It's awesome. And she's doing some really, really good stuff that Cobb County desperately needs. So hat off to her. Salute her all day.
Yes, she is incredible, and she has transformed it. I think Irene has been here for about 5 years or so, but because Cobb Collaborative itself, I think has been around for quite a while, maybe 15 years or so. But Irene has been here because I think the Georgia Family Connection Partnership has been around maybe 30 years or so. They've been doing their work for a long time.
My bad. I didn't know that.
No, it's okay.
I didn't know. Shout out to Irene.
Shout out.
Yes, Irene is incredible, and she's done so much for Cobb Collaborative in the past 5 years or so that she's been here, and really expanding our network and creating deeper connections in our community. And so it's definitely a blessing to be working with Irene and learning from her and getting to know all of these incredible people and organizations that are in our community. It fills me with so much joy and gives me so much hope, and continues that lighting that spark for me and continuing to give me that passion of why I'm doing what I'm doing. And so Cobb Collaborative.
I think every nonprofit looks for an Irene and a Kaitlyn. Wouldn't you say, Sheila?
Yeah.
we need an Irene and a Kaitlyn.
Definitely. Well, we want to just thank you for coming on with us. We know that a lot of people are getting really good information. I got great information. How about you?
Definitely. That it's definitely worth the conversation, and right in time with elections. I mean, this is information that we need for every election, but this is right in time with the elections coming up. what did you say, starting in August, we can start asking for our ballots?
Yes. Starting at the end of August, we can start requesting those absentee ballots. The registration deadline is October 11th, so make sure you are encouraging people to not only register, but check your registration status. Make sure it is still active and you've got that green check mark in your registration status. So going to Secretary of State website, it's the My Voter page. You can Google it or just go to mvp.sos.ga.gov. But again, just go to Google My Voter page. It'll pull right up for you and check, verify, and then look up all that information. Look up your ballot beforehand. Make those educated decisions for yourself and encourage everyone around you to do the same. Talk to your family, talk to your friends, and get out, use your vote and use your voice and make a difference.
And one more time, what are those two websites you mentioned earlier?
Yes. So first one is going to be vote411.org. That one is through the League of Women Voters. And then the other one is going to be mvp.branch.vote. So MVP, like my voter page, but it's not. So mvp.branch, BRANCH, like a tree, .vote. So those two websites, they are also nonpartisan. Again, not trying to push a specific party or candidate, just giving you information you need in one platform so you don't have to search for a million platforms and figure out what's real and what's not. And then, two, when you're going through those, write down who you want to vote for on a piece of paper, because when you go vote, you actually cannot have your cell phone out with you. So if you take your phone out to try to be like, okay, this is what I'm voting for, you can't do that. So you've got to make sure you write it down on a piece of paper, have a little cheat sheet for yourself, and then you can use that to help you make your ballot. And then you're in and out too. So.
Wow, that was a great tidbit right there, because I didn't know that. Okay,
yes.
Awesome.
Most people don't. So.
Well, that's why you're here. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, what we want to leave everyone that's listening is don't accept the unacceptable. That's it.
Right. Well, thank you everybody for listening. Please, if you found anything of value in this episode, please like it, subscribe to our podcast, and please share this episode with your friends, your family, and your online community. If you'd like to advertise with the CNN podcast, visit our website at the CNN podcast and click the Advertise with Us tab. Or you may visit the podcast to contact Sheila or myself. And until next time, as always, be awesome and be blessed.